Hello and welcome to the Voice of Standard Users, a podcast brought to you by IFAN. I'm Chaim Oren, your host, and in each episode, I speak with leaders who are shaping industries around the globe through the use of standards in practice. It is my great honor to introduce my guest today, Mr. Matthew Sexton. He is the Technical and Compliance Director at BMI UK Ireland, part of the world's largest manufacturer of roofing and waterproofing systems. He works daily with constructions and fire performance standards across the UK and Europe. He also is a chair of BSI, the British Standard Institute, and Industry Committee, and represents standard users as deputy chair of the British Standard User Group. In addition of all of this, Matthew also serves on the IFAN Board and bringing a strong practitioner voice to the table. So Matthew, great to have you on this podcast.
Thank you, Chaim. Great to be here.
Okay, so without further ado, let's start the podcast, and I would like to ask you the first question. What was the first time you realized that standards actually matter in real life, not just on paper?
Okay, I think I'll give you an example here. To me, the easiest way to know that standards really mean something and how important standards are is when there isn't a standard. So when you're trying to do something and there is no standard, and you're trying to get a group of people across industry to try and do something, you suddenly realize when there is no standard to provide direction, guidance, support, and a structure to what you're doing, then you really realize why we have to have standards.
Okay, great. So you work daily with constructions and the fire performance standards. Can you share one real example where a standard made a tangible difference to safety or performance on the ground?
Okay, I think a lot of the standards that I use are relate to allowing people to compare the performance of different products or systems. But one of the key areas, for example, is we do in the world of BMI, we manufacture millions of clay and concrete roof tiles around the world. And the freeze thaw test, this is where we take a tile and expose it to freezing conditions and then allow it to thaw and then refreeze. When we were able to actually demonstrate that the number of cycles is very impactful on the performance of tiles in the world, this to me was a really quite key area of really understanding why standards are so important and why you have to follow them rigorously.
Very powerful example. Matthew, you are both a user and a contributor to standards. Based on your experience, how does input from the industry changes the quality of standards?
I think it's absolutely critical, particularly I believe with all standards that the users of standards are the people who best know and understand the standards. So particularly if you're looking to revise standards, bring standards up to date, the experiences of users, and particularly I'm a great believer you need the experience of users from different countries who speak different languages as their first language, because it's critical that people understand how people interpret the words. So if the words, for example, are written in English, I'm a native English speaker. But if you have somebody from a foreign country whose English is their second language, their interpretation of the words can be different. So it's super critical that you have a broad range of people across different countries and be very careful about translation. because
Right.
things do not always translate well from one language to another
Exactly.
that don't cause misunderstandings or potential confusion as to what is the real intent of the standard.
So the key is to include people from various countries in
Yeah,
order to
the
derive a meaning,
countries,
one meaning. Yeah,
the countries that are going to use the standard need to be involved. And to me, that's where IFAN comes in its element, because it's an international federation.
exactly. Yeah,
So it's representing lots of people, and those people need to be involved, and they need to have a voice within the standard. Because I've sat on many committees where I understand exactly what the intent is in English.
I see.
But if, for example, I have colleagues I work very closely with who are based in Germany, and they would say, "Oh, does it really mean that?" And if I translate that in my mind into German, maybe I have a slightly different interpretation of what that means.
I see. So that's the reason for using international teams in
Correct.
order to globalize the meaning of the standards, right?
Yeah.
Great. So moving on to the next questions. Where do you see most often a gap between how standards are written and how are they implemented on site? And how can standard developers learn from that gap?
Okay. I think that this is about what I call practical application. So something may work as a standard on paper. It may
Right.
work on the standard as a standard in theory, but until you actually sit there and try to use the standard, you don't actually know the standard will work. So one of the things that I do when I visit our quality control laboratories is I will say, okay, show me a test. And I will sit there with the copy of the standard and follow how they are trying to perform the test and comparing this to what the standard says. And sometimes you realize very quickly that there's elements of it where it can be even nearly impossible to follow the wording in a practical sense, in reality of doing the actions required by the standard. So to me, when you write a standard, particularly if it's a test standard where you're going to perform the test,
Right.
you must trial this. You must try to do this, to do the test itself, and get people to understand what you're trying to achieve.
Right. And in that way, you narrow the gap, right, between the standard and the test.
Correct. Because otherwise, what you will end up with is a position where different people are doing the test differently, not really by intent, but just by interpretation.
I
And
see.
just by so, for example, if you have you can specify the requirements of a piece of test equipment.
Yeah.
But if this test equipment then varies in from different suppliers and reacts in different ways or whatever, it may give you the same result, but it may not do it in exactly the same way. So your description then of how to do the test has to be informative, but also not overly prescriptive, so that it only works with, say, one particular manufacturer's equipment.
Right. It has to be flexible to accommodate different scenarios of test equipment.
Yeah. But equally, it must not mean that you will get different results from applying the test, if that makes sense. So there is a time and a place for being very prescriptive and saying you must use this specific equipment. Okay. Or you have to create a specification for the equipment that means you can then choose from different suppliers.
I see. Okay. Makes sense. Okay, so moving on, why it is so important that standard users are represented at decision-making tables, especially in high impact sectors like construction?
Okay. I think I've kind of mentioned that before. To me, it's the power of people who actually use standards must be there in the decision-making process, because they are the people who are going to have to use the new standard. And we need to take those people on the journey rather than them feel the standard is being pushed and, I'm not saying forced, but
Right.
that they're just presented it with as a fait accompli. You see what I mean? That they're just given this standard, your problem.
Right. They have to be part of the process, right?
Exactly. We need their buy-in. We need them to actually understand what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve it, and what the benefits are.
Okay. Okay. So, based on your opinion, what stops many companies or practitioners from getting involved in standard work? This is a phenomena, quite a wide phenomena. And what would you say to encourage them to really take part and get involved?
Okay, so I think there's normally 2 or 3 factors.
Okay.
I would say one factor is experience. Sometimes people feel that when they're starting out in their career, they don't have the experience to participate in standards.
Mm-hmm.
I would say no. So one of the committees, for example, that I chair, I made an active decision that when I became chair, this created an additional space on the committee, and I said we should really encourage a younger person to take up this space. So somebody who can, to start with, observe more than anything and ask questions, because in my experience, and I have 2 daughters who are grown up but still of an age where they're challenging people and asking awkward questions, that youngsters will look at things in different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And will challenge people in a way that I wouldn't challenge somebody. And we have to remember the younger generations I see from the teams that work for me is they think in different ways, they function in different ways. So I was taught you read a standard from beginning to end. They don't like to sit and read a standard from beginning to end.
Okay.
They just want to find the bit that they think is relevant. So they will just search. They'll do word searches and things like this.
Wow.
And that, to me, has dangers.
Skip to the relevant part, right?
Well, what they think is the relevant part. But the way some standards are structured, you find what you think is the relevant part, but actually you need to have read maybe the section before or the section after to fully understand the context. And therefore, if you don't do that, you're in danger of you have a false understanding.
I see. Now, you mentioned 3 factors. What are the others?
So the other is time. The standard process is long. To participate in the writing, developing and creating of standards doesn't take weeks, doesn't take months. In my experience, this takes years.
Years, okay.
Yeah. And or certainly at least a year. And to get people to be able to commit their time regularly and significantly over that lengthy period of time is challenging. In a business environment where everybody is under pressure, there's new demands, new requirements, new efficiencies required, committing your time to this and trying to explain to your boss that you want to go to a meeting that will not produce anything of any value for a year, difficult. Whereas he's saying, no, I want you at a meeting on this topic that will deliver next week or even maybe deliver today. So it's something we have to educate, our senior people within organizations to really understand the benefits of standards. Otherwise, they won't allow their teams to participate in that standards.
And what is the third factor that you mentioned?
Third one is money. It's costly, both in time and just in terms of resource. If you're talking about senior people, if you look at that hourly rate for somebody, that the cost per hour. So every hour that they go to a meeting about standards, if a business is saying, well, what is that costing me? That is an expensive sum.
So you really got to buy the commitment from the senior executives. Otherwise, it will be difficult to get the younger people to involve. Exactly.
I'm very lucky. I've got a boss who really understands standards, understands me as well as a person. I'm lucky. I work with a boss who I've known for over 26 years.
Oh wow!
So we have worked together.
Know each other.
We know each other. We sometimes don't. We can just look at each other. Does that make sense? We don't always need to say anything to each other. We just look at each other and we know what we're thinking. We know what the process is that we're going through. So that's an environment where I feel supported, and I know he understands why I feel that we must be involved in standards. But that's not in every business.
Yes, I do understand this complexity, definitely. So you work across UK and European markets.
Yeah.
So how do differences in standards or conformity practices affect users in those markets?
Well, we say we have harmonized standards. How harmonized they are can be challenging. And in my own sector, in roofing, our external fire test standard contains 4 different methodologies.
Wow. Okay.
Because Europe has not been able to agree on one methodology. So there are challenges. There are challenges in terms of different interpretations, different requirements, different perceptions. At the end of the day, a lot of standards in construction, we are trying to comply with what the regulator requires for the building. For the safety of the occupants in the building. But that's not at a European level. That's at a national level.
I see. Okay.
So safety has always been, SEN has always said that safety is outside the remit of the standard. That's the responsibility of the country at a national level. So there are challenges.
I see.
It requires a great deal of cooperation and a lot of communication and just understanding everybody's perspectives, because everybody comes at this from a slightly different perspective sometimes.
So you really have to secure alignment between the various players in this process.
Well, standards are written by consensus.
I see.
And to me, it's also critical that standards are written based on evidence, on test evidence, on scientific data, if this makes sense. So if you're writing a standard and somebody who is participating has very credible and strong evidence, that's going to be very difficult to ignore in the standard, if not impossible, in my opinion. So if a country or an organization comes with very strong, compelling, factual evidence,
yes,
then how can you say no? How can you say we should do something different?
I see.
You have to base standards on evidence.
Right. Okay. So, Matthew, we're nearing the conclusion of the podcast. And so I'd like to end this podcast. If you can kindly share with us one piece of advice to people writing standards today on behalf of users, what would it be?
Listen to people and their comments. When you put a standard out to public comment, really listen hard, and if possible, interact with the people who have commented, because sometimes it's not always just what they put in their words in the official comment. You will gain more understanding by actually talking and engaging with those people, because to me, they've demonstrated a strong desire to be involved and support standards by responding to the public comment, and therefore it's worth your while to reach out to them. It's worth your while to actually speak to them, talk to them, engage with them, to really understand what sits behind their comments.
Right. So there are no shortcuts in this process.
Oh no. No. To me, if you make shortcuts in writing or updating standards, all this means is you will be reopening the standard much quicker, because people, when they receive the new document, will come back with concerns, with queries, and certainly under BS0, the British Standards Institute guidance is that a member of a committee or a panel that has written the standard cannot give guidance, cannot give clarity on how to interpret or use the standard. If the standard is not clear, then the committee should require the standard to be reopened and amend the standard, not engage with people in a way to try to give them understanding as to what was meant. So it's really critically important that engagement before you press print, before you actually put the standard up as being published, that you really are confident that as wide an audience as possible has commented and had their opinions considered. I mean, I accept you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy. There will always be some people who are not happy with the outcome, but you really must make a strong effort as much as possible to engage and listen and take on board what's said.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Matthew, for your extensive knowledge that you share with us, your insights and perspective. It was a real pleasure speaking to you, and I wish you lots of success in achieving your goals at BMI. And for our listeners, thank you. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes and follow us on IFAN LinkedIn page, because standards make the world go around. See you soon.